Hi, and welcome to Best in Tesla. So we have a lot of numbers from Q1 2022, and the trend are continuing for most of the legacy automakers and Tesla. But they are heading in two different directions. But I know many like to use the excuse of COVID and shortage, but this is only speeding up the inevitable. Because legacy automakers has been going down for over half a decade, not just the last 2 years, but for 7 years. The collapse of the ICE car industry is happening right in front of our eyes. And Tesla is rising incredibly fast, and so is the EV market. And to understand how quickly this can actually happen, we have to understand what exponential growth actually means and what it looks like, because it is so difficult to actually wrap your head around it. But in today's video, I will show you some illustrations that will visualize exponential growth. And this might blow your mind if you haven't seen this before. And I will show you visually as well the collapse of the ICE industry and the rise of the new car market and its all dominating force. So let's check it all out and let's dive right in. So, it has not been looking too good for the legacy car makers over the last couple of years. And they of course all blame it on COVID and supply chain shortage, but that is only speeding up the inevitable. Because if we look back even further at some of the legacy automakers, we can see that is not something new. They all pretty much peaked in 2015 or 2016 and have been on a downward trend ever since, not just in the last 2 years. We can see here on this chart pretty much all legacy automakers peaked in the US car market in 15 or 16 and have been going down ever since. And someone like Ford, whose home turf is the US, where about 50% of all their sales is happening, we can see they peaked all the way back in 2015, almost 7 years ago, and have only been going down ever since, and dropped about 36% in the sales in US over the last 6 years. And GM is the same story. And also, if we look on a global scale, we can see GM peaked back in 2016 with just over 10 million vehicles sold to only 6.29 million vehicles in 2021. That is a drop in sales of 37% in 5 years. And GM just dropped another 20% in Q1 of 2022 compared to Q1 of 2021. But GM is not the only one. Pretty much everyone was down in Q1 in 2022. Here is the list of the automaker sales in the US, and just look at the drop here. BMW down 24%, Daimler down 17%, Ford down 27%, GM down 16%, Honda and Toyota down 30%, but beaten by Nissan that dropped 41%. But they were all beaten by Volkswagen that lost 44% in Q1 in the US market, the second biggest car market on the planet. And Volkswagen is having a problem with their EV sales in the world's biggest car market in China as well. And remember, all these legacy car makers, which sales are collapsing, have hundreds of billions of dollars in debt and have to invest billions of dollars in the shift to EVs while their ICE business is collapsing and they are losing money on the EV business, and they don't really have a lot of cash on hand, and they can't really raise money because they don't have a huge big market cap as Tesla, and their trend over the last 7 years is down, nothing but down. Wow, this is not going to end well. They are literally dropping out of the sky. This is a collapse if I have ever seen one. And remember, the old legacy automakers don't really have any money because of all their huge debt. So if we look at Ford, GM and Tesla, well, Tesla have $8.9 billion in total debt, but has $17.7 billion cash on hand. So if we take their debt and their cash on hands, they are in plus, in total net debt of plus $8.8 billion, where GM has minus $86 billion in net debt and Ford has minus $115 billion in net debt. These guys are heading for bankruptcy. Remember, we can always use the Altman set score. That is a formula for determining whether a company, notably in the manufacturing space, is heading for bankruptcy. But James Stefansson on Twitter has already put the car industry into this formula last year, and this is what it looked like. Yes, everything points at these guys are going out of business. But they will just be bailed out. Will they though? Because someone like Volkswagen has over $210 billion in debt. Can or will the German government be able to just write that off? Don't know. We have to wait and see, but it really doesn't look good. But as I said, pretty much everyone went down in Q1 in the US car market. But there was one that actually grew, and not by a little, but by a lot, and that was, of course, Tesla, that grew 93% in Q1 in the US. And everyone else was down. And according to Piper Sandler, Model 3 now represents about 1 in every 4 luxury sedans sold in the US. That is 4 times higher than the next best-selling luxury sedan, the BMW 3 Series. 4 times higher than number 2. Yeah, no competition whatsoever. And that is not EV, this is just luxury sedans, no matter propulsion. And the Model Y has become the best-selling luxury SUV in the US as well, even before the Texas factory opens. This is simply total domination in its segments in the US. Period. Like Dan Ives says, the US EV market is Tesla's world and everyone else is just paying rent. Just look at this chart. Yes, Tesla's market share has been going down, but as you can see, it actually came up over 70% again in the EV market share in the US, even with all the competition the short sellers were screaming about. But people continue to underestimate Tesla's ability to grow all the time. Just look at this chart made by EV Adoption from October 2020, and that was still wrong even for the year 2020. He believed in 66.6% market share for 2020 in the US, but Tesla ended up with 79% of the EV market, and in 2021 he thought 54.2%, and Tesla had 72% EV market share. That's a big miss in prediction only 1 year out, and in 2022 he thought Tesla would go down to 42.6%. I don't see that happening either. We are seeing everyone collapsing, and Ford and GM, that are really some big boys in the US car market, is hardly making EVs. GM made 457 EVs in Q1 in total globally, for crying out loud. This is such a joke. GM sales has been dropping for 7 years. And GM has been talking about them making a lot of EVs for 7 years, and now here in Q1 2022 they delivered a grand total of less than 500 EVs. GM is simply collapsing and is not making the shift to EVs fast enough. It hardly seems like they're trying. They have been talking for a decade but have nothing to show for it. And we see this all over the world. The car market is going down, the ICE manufacturer sales are collapsing, but EVs are rising. And Tesla is either dominating completely like in the US or being part of the top list of EVs. It doesn't matter if you look at the US, Europe or China market, the world's 3 biggest car market. Tesla is dominating the EV market and has even started becoming big enough to have the best-selling cars in their segments. Like in China, the biggest car market, the Model Y has become the best-selling luxury SUV by far. And the SUV market is the biggest segment in the world, and Tesla has just started and is now turning on 2 new giant factories that will only be spitting out SUVs for the rest of the year and really ramp up in 2023. And we see this with the entire EV market, because everyone except maybe the US car makers and Toyota is really trying to ramp up EV production as fast as possible, and the Chinese are pushing hard, both because it will help them tremendously with the air pollution in their big cities that they are really struggling with, but also China is seeing a big opportunity to become a big player in the future of the car market, because they never succeeded in becoming part of the global ICE car market. But now they have a new chance, and people are really underestimating how fast this could go, because this is happening so fast here in Europe, and China is hard to understand. Norway is always there, but they're gonna look slow at the EV adoption compared to the rest of Europe. We are looking at the first step of the exponential growth curve, the so-called S-curve. But we hear this a lot. We are seeing exponential growth, but most people can't even imagine what that means, even though we have seen this happen so many times in so many industries through the years. But still, when we are talking about it and seeing the first step of the exponential growth, it is still hard to visualize what this will end up with and what this means. So I would like to illustrate that, because it is something our human mind is not set up to intuitively understand. But when we visualize it, it becomes mind-boggling how fast things can happen when we're talking about exponential growth. The best example I have ever seen is the chessboard analysis. And there is even an old Indian legend about this. A king that liked to play chess that challenged a man passing through one day and asked him what he would like as a prize if he won. And he would like some rice. He liked 1 grain of rice on square 1 of the chessboard, and then doubling it for each square. So 2 on square 2, 4 on square 3, 8 on square 4, 16 on square 5, and so on. And looking at these numbers, this looks pretty harmless, right? But if you don't know the chessboard example, you would probably be very surprised by the amount of rice the king would have to give to the man if he lost. Because out of the 64 squares on the chessboard, only at 30th square, there should be 536 million grains of rice. But at the 40th square, he need about 550 billion grains of rice. And on the last square, he would need 9,220,000 trillions. Just on the last square. So in total, the king would have to give the man 18,550,000 trillion grains of rice. This is about 535 billion tons of rice. To put that in perspective, that is about 1,000 times more rice than the entire world's rice production is in a year. The pile of rice combined from all the squares on the chessboard would be as big as Mount Everest. From 1 grain of rice to a pile as big as Mount Everest only took 64 steps of exponential growth. This really puts things in perspective for me, at least. I hope this also gives you some idea of how fast exponential growth is. The first few steps don't seem like much, but then it just explodes. And when we look what's going on in the EV market, we are right now going through square 1 to square 2, or maybe square 2 to square 3 on the chessboard. But anyway, we are very early in the S-curve. But the BEV market did more than double in 2021, and I do expect the same to happen again here in 2022. The BEVs did double from about 3% of the global market share in 2020 to 6% in market share in 2021. Still looks very harmless, right? But let's do the rice experiment here with the EV market share and see how quickly we will get up the S-curve. So 6% in 2021, we are going to double that in 2022, and we have 12% BEVs in total new car sales. Then we're going to double that again in 2023, and we will have 24%, and again in 2024, and we will have 48%, and in 2025 we will have 96% market share. That would be an exponential growth curve in the market share. But of course we have some real world factors to count in, like shortage in materials for the batteries for all these EVs and so on, and of course the pace we are able to ramp up production of all of this. But we also have to remember everyone in the mining business is going to want to do this as fast as possible, because right now the demand is pretty much endless. You can sell every metal you dig up from the ground right now. So the faster you are, the bigger your business will become, guaranteed. But even if we don't double it every year and say, okay, that is not realistic, what about 50% growth year over year instead of 100%? Well, let's try to do that. I do believe we will easily see a doubling this year, as we can see EVs rising so fast right now. So let's start with about 12% in 2022 and then add 50% going forward. So in 2023 we are looking at 18%, 24, 27%, in 25, 40%. Which is ARK Invest's predictions, right? And in 2026, 60%, and in 27, 91%. We really have to slow the growth we're seeing right now and the projections we are seeing and the trend we are seeing way down to not hit over 80% BEV market share by 2030. We have to go way under 30% increase from the 12% in 2022 to not hit over 80% in 2030. And right now we are seeing the market is growing over 100% and seems to be only speeding up. And in some places it even goes faster, like we see in Sweden, where the BEVs grew 285% in Q1, while the collapse of the ICE industry is still happening. The car market in Sweden was down 31.5% in Q1. But the BEVs grew 285%. So what we're seeing happening right now in front of our eyes is the collapse of the ICE industry and the exponential rise of the electric car market. This is happening so unbelievably fast, it's hard to wrap your head around. But stay tuned, because I'm working on another video about why the legacy automakers can't see this is happening, even though the data is right there in front of their eyes. But it is physically impossible for them to see the data, because many of them are stuck in a paradigm paralysis. And we will also look at the advice the former CEO of Nokia gave, that the legacy automakers are just ignoring. So don't forget to hit that subscribe button, notification bell, so you don't miss out on my next video. And thank you for watching. And until next time, take care out there and be nice.